Thank you for being here. Please comment the letter Y below to let me know you are ready. And listen as I tell you the rest of the story. I stood in the grand foyer of the Atoria Hotel, the kind of place where the chandeliers look like dripping diamonds and the air smells of expensive champagne and roasted prime rib. The soft hum of a live jazz quartet drifted from the rooftop terrace. Through the glass doors I could see them. My mother, draped in a tailored silk dress, and my father, standing tall in his custom suit. They were laughing, clinking glasses with the chief of surgery, radiating absolute pride. And right in the center of it all was Carter, my twin brother. They were celebrating his graduation from medical school. A massive, lavish party thrown for one specific reason. They had just paid off every single cent of his student loans. A debt-free celebration. The invitations had called it. I looked down at my own worn dress shoes. My feet ached from a 14-hour shift at the ER. I had the exact same medical degree as Carter. We had walked the same stage. But my loans, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of crushing debt, were mine alone to bear. I wasn't the golden child. I was just the shadow. My mind flashed back to a few weeks prior, standing frozen outside our family kitchen, listening to my mother's sharp, casual voice piercing through the drywall. "He deserves better, honey," she had said to my father, dismissing me completely. "Nathan is independent. He'll figure it out. Carter needs this." I reached a hand into the inside pocket of my cheap suit jacket. My fingers brushed against the crisp edge of a folded envelope. It was heavy, sealed with a formal crest. They didn't know it yet, but the piece of paper inside that envelope was about to shatter their perfect, carefully curated world. It was the key to tearing down the empire of favoritism they had built around my brother. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold air of the hotel lobby fill my lungs. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is loud and messy. What I felt was something much sharper, cold, precise. I was about to walk into that room and let them dig their own graves in front of the most powerful doctors in the state. But to understand why I had to do this, why I couldn't just walk away and let them have their night, you need to understand how we got here. You need to know what it's like to spend 26 years fighting for a scrap of validation, only to realize the game was rigged from the very start. Graduation day was supposed to be the great equalizer. That's what I told myself for 4 grueling years. Medical school is a meat grinder. It doesn't care who your parents are when you're staring at a crashing patient at 3 in the morning. It just demands excellence. When Carter and I stood in the staging area, adjusting our identical graduation caps, he looked nervous. I felt nothing but a quiet, burning focus. We walked the stage. We heard our names called. Dr. Carter Harris. Dr. Nathan Harris. Same degree, same last name. But the moment we stepped off that stage and the sea of families swarmed the graduates, the illusion of equality shattered. I watched from a few yards away as my father grabbed Carter by the shoulders, shaking him with aggressive pride, his face red with excitement. My mother was practically in tears, holding Carter's face, kissing his cheek. Aunts, uncles, and family friends crowded around him, snapping photos, handing him cards thick with cash. I stood by a brick pillar, adjusting my robe. I waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. I watched my mother look right in my direction, her eyes sweeping past me to wave at a wealthy family friend. It wasn't an oversight. It was an erasure. I didn't walk over to them. I didn't beg for my share of the spotlight. I turned around, folded my graduation gown over my arm, and walked out of the campus gates alone. The heat of the May afternoon beat down on the pavement. I walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. While Carter was probably being ushered into a chauffeured town car for a celebratory steak dinner, I swiped my faded transit card and took a seat in the back of a rattling city bus. I bought a $2 black coffee from a corner bodega, sat on the steps of my cramped apartment building, and raised the paper cup to the empty street. "Congratulations, Nathan," I whispered to myself. I thought that would be the worst of it. I thought the sting of being ignored on graduation day was the peak of their neglect. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning of a much darker betrayal. This dynamic wasn't new. It was baked into the foundation of our family. I vividly remember the week we turned 16. It was pouring rain, the kind of torrential Texas downpour that turns the streets into rivers. I was standing at the end of our driveway, the hood of my cheap windbreaker plastered to my skull, the straps of my backpack digging into my shoulders. It was filled with AP chemistry and calculus textbooks. Suddenly, the garage door rumbled open. The sleek, aggressive purr of a high-end engine cut through the sound of the rain. A brand new, bright white Porsche rolled out onto the pavement. Carter was behind the wheel. My father was sitting in the passenger seat, pointing at the dashboard features, grinning from ear to ear. Carter rolled the window down just enough to shout over the engine. "Hey man, look what Dad got me for passing the driving test." I stood there, soaked to the bone. "Nice," I managed to say. "Want a ride to school?" he asked, though he was already checking his reflection in the rearview mirror. "No," my father interrupted from the passenger seat, rolling his window down a crack. "You don't want to drag wet mud into the leather, Nathan. The bus will be here in a minute." Builds character. The window glided up. The Porsche surged forward, its taillights bleeding red into the gray morning, leaving me standing in a cloud of exhaust and splashing rainwater. They always had an excuse. Carter was the social one. Carter needed the right image to succeed. I was the smart, independent one. I didn't need a car because I was focused on my studies. They disguised their neglect as a compliment to my resilience. It took me years to realize that building character was just their code for, "We don't want to spend money on you." The gap only widened when college acceptances rolled in. I had spent my entire high school career grinding. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I stayed in the library until the janitors turned off the lights. My goal was simple: get a full-ride scholarship so I wouldn't be financially chained to my parents. The day the letter arrived from UT Austin, offering me a full academic scholarship to their pre-med program, my hands shook. I ran into the living room, out of breath, holding the thick envelope. My father was sitting in his leather recliner, staring blankly at the television. My mother was pacing the floor, a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. Carter was slumped on the sofa, staring at the floor. He had just received his rejection letter from his top-choice school. "Dad, Mom," I said, unable to hide the massive smile on my face. "I got it. Full ride to UT Austin." My father didn't even look up from the TV. My mother stopped pacing, her eyes flashing with a sudden, sharp irritation. She walked over to me, snatched the letter out of my hand, gave it a 2-second glance, and shoved it back against my chest. "Nathan, show some basic empathy," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "Your brother is devastated right now. Have some tact and go to your room. We don't need you rubbing your little victories in his face." "Little victories?" I stared at her. "It's a full scholarship. Covers everything." My father finally spoke, his voice heavy with annoyance. "Good, because we're going to need the entire college fund to pay the out-of-state tuition for Carter's backup school. Don't make this about you today, Nathan. Go upstairs." I walked up the stairs, the silence of the house pressing down on me. They weren't proud. They were relieved I wouldn't cost them anything, so they could funnel every single dollar of their wealth into Carter. That was the day I stopped seeking their approval. I started keeping a mental ledger. Fast forward to the middle of our medical residency. I was working a brutal rotation in the ER. 14-hour shifts. Blood, chaos, people screaming. I was surviving on vending machine coffee and sheer willpower. Carter, meanwhile, had used our father's connections to secure a cushy, low-stress residency in a private dermatology clinic. One evening, I dragged myself to my parents' house to pick up some old medical textbooks I had stored in the attic. I let myself in through the side door. The house was quiet. I took my boots off so I wouldn't track dirt onto the pristine hardwood floors. As I walked down the hallway, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. It was my mother talking to Aunt Eli. "I just don't understand why you're paying off Carter's entire loan balance. Robert and you," Aunt Eli was saying, her voice laced with hesitation. Doesn't Nathan have the exact same amount of debt? Isn't that a bit unfair? I froze, my back pressed against the hallway wall. I heard the sharp clink of a wine glass hitting the granite counter. Unfair? My mother scoffed. Eli, please. Nathan is a workhorse. He's always been fine on his own. He'll pay it off eventually. But Carter? Carter has potential for high society. He's going to open a private practice. He needs clean credit. He needs to buy a house in the right neighborhood. He deserves better, honey. He can't be dragging $250,000 in debt into his future. Nathan doesn't care about that stuff. But to not give Nathan a dime? Aunt Eli pressed, sounding genuinely uncomfortable. Nathan is independent. He doesn't need us, my mother said firmly, ending the conversation. Besides, Carter is the one who will carry the family name in the circles that matter. I stood there in the shadows, my jaw locked so tight my teeth ached. My chest felt hollowed out. It wasn't just favoritism. It was a calculated financial and emotional abandonment. To them, I wasn't a son. I was a stray dog that had learned to feed itself, so they felt no obligation to put food in my bowl. I turned around, walked silently out the side door, and locked it behind me. I didn't get my textbooks. I went straight back to my tiny, run-down apartment, sat on the edge of my mattress, and let the cold reality wash over me. They thought I was just a workhorse. They thought I would quietly accept my place in the dirt while they built Carter a castle. They were dead wrong. 2 weeks later, the heavy, gold-embossed envelope arrived in my mailbox. Robert and Eleanor Harris cordially invite you to a debt-free celebration in honor of Dr. Carter Harris. I stared at the thick cardstock, tracing the gold foil lettering with my thumb. It was so brazen. They weren't even trying to hide the disparity anymore. They were throwing a massive gala to celebrate handing my brother financial freedom on a silver platter, and they were inviting me to stand on the sidelines and clap. I pulled out my phone and dialed my mother's number. I hit the record button on my screen. It had become a habit lately, documenting their manipulation. Nathan, she answered, her tone overly bright. Fake. Did you get the invitation? I got it, I said, keeping my voice perfectly flat. A debt-free celebration for Carter. Are you going to announce that you paid off my loans, too? Or is this just a solo act? There was a pause. The fake brightness dropped instantly, replaced by that familiar, condescending sigh. Nathan, don't start this. You've always been the strong one. You have a great salary coming up when you finish residency. Carter needed more help getting established. We're just trying to support him where he struggles. He struggles because you've never let him face a single consequence in his life. I fired back. I work 80 hours a week in the ER. He works 40 hours a week looking at acne. We have the exact same debt. Well, maybe if you spent less time being bitter and more time networking, you wouldn't be in this position, she snapped. Are you coming to the party or not? Don't ruin your brother's night. I'll be there, I said softly and hung up. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't scream. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the application portal for the Clarence King Fellowship. It was the most prestigious, fiercely competitive medical research fellowship in the country. Only one resident in the entire nation received it. The prize? Full loan forgiveness, a massive research grant, and instant elite status in the medical community. I had been working on my proposal for a year. It was time to finalize it. The hospital was a war zone the next day. A multi-car pileup on the interstate had flooded the ER. I was running on 3 hours of sleep, my scrubs stained with iodine and sweat. Luke, my fellow resident and the only guy who actually understood the hell I was going through, tossed me a lukewarm energy drink across the nurse's station. Drink up, man. You look like a corpse. Thanks, I muttered, cracking the can. I just need to survive until 6. I have an interview for the King Fellowship tomorrow morning. I need to prep. Before Luke could respond, Matthew strutted into the trauma bay. Matthew was a first-year resident, arrogant, came from money, and happened to be one of Carter's drinking buddies. He treated the ER like a TV show where he was the star. Harris, Matthew barked, waving a chart. Bed 4. Guy is complaining of chest pain, but his EKG is clear and his troponin levels are normal. I'm discharging him with antacids. Anxiety. I took the chart, glancing at the patient's vitals. Something felt off. I walked over to bed 4. The patient was a man in his 50s, sweating profusely, holding his jaw. Matthew, I called out, keeping my voice steady. Did you ask him about his back? Why would I? Matthew scoffed, crossing his arms. It's heartburn. Don't overcomplicate it just to show off. He has a tearing sensation between his shoulder blades, I said, looking at the patient, who nodded weakly. I turned back to Matthew, my eyes locking onto his. It's not anxiety and it's not a heart attack. It's an aortic dissection. If you discharge him, he'll be dead in the parking lot in 10 minutes. Get him to CT right now and page cardiothoracic surgery. Matthew froze, the color draining from his face as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. The attending physician, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped in. Good catch, Dr. Harris, the attending said, glaring at Matthew. Move the patient. Now. As Matthew scrambled, terrified, Luke nudged me. Nice one. Put that rich kid right in his place. I took a sip of the energy drink. It was a small victory, but it felt good. It reminded me that out here in the real world, competence mattered more than a bloodline. But the real victory was still to come. That weekend, my mother called, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Nathan, sweetie, the family computer in the study is acting up. Since you're so good with technology, could you come look at it? We need to print some things for Carter's party. I should have said no, but a dark curiosity pulled me back to that house. I sat in my father's heavy mahogany study, clicking through the old desktop. It was a simple malware issue. I cleaned it out in 10 minutes. But as I was closing the email application, a drafted message in the sent folder caught my eye. The subject line read, Confidential regarding residency placements, Nathan and Carter Harris. My blood ran cold. The email was sent 2 years ago, right before Carter and I were matched for our residencies. It was addressed to the Regional Residency Placement Board Director. I clicked it open. Dear Director, as a mother, it is difficult to write this. While both my sons are applying for placements, I feel it is my duty to inform you that Nathan has struggled significantly with severe anxiety and stress management issues under pressure. We fear a high-stakes surgical or ER placement might trigger a mental health crisis for him. We respectfully request that you consider Carter for the top-tier clinical spots, as he is mentally fortified, and perhaps steer Nathan toward a slower-paced, less demanding research track for his own safety. Sincerely, Eleanor Harris. I stopped breathing. The walls of the study seemed to warp and spin. She hadn't just ignored me. She had actively tried to sabotage my career to eliminate the competition for Carter. She had weaponized a fake mental health crisis to ruin my chances at a top placement. The only reason I still got the ER spot was because my test scores were flawlessly in the top 1%, overriding her poison. I kept scrolling. Below that email was a forwarded message from my cousin, Wyatt. Wyatt, the guy who always slapped me on the back at family barbecues and told me how much he respected my hard work. Wyatt's message read, Aunt Eleanor, just letting you know Nathan is applying for that massive Clarence King Fellowship. He was working on the proposal at the coffee shop today. Might want to prepare Carter to apply too, or find a way to make sure Nathan doesn't overshadow the party. They were all in on it. Wyatt was spying on me to protect his status with my wealthy parents, probably hoping for a piece of the inheritance down the line. I didn't cry. The capacity for tears had been burned out of me. My jaw clenched so tight a vein throbbed violently at my temple. I took out my phone and took clear, focused photos of every single email on that screen. They thought I was just a quiet workhorse. They thought I would just take the saddle and plow their fields. I closed the computer, walked out of the house, and drove away without saying goodbye. The next 3 days were a blur of adrenaline and clinical precision. I worked my shifts, I slept when I could. I waited. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, chewing on a stale turkey sandwich, when my phone vibrated. The caller ID showed Dr. Gabriel, the head of the hospital's research division and the man who had sponsored my fellowship application. Dr. Gabriel, I answered, wiping my mouth with a paper napkin. Nathan. His voice was tight, urgent. I threw the sandwich in the trash and sprinted to the elevator. My mind raced. If I got it, everything changed. If I didn't, I was stuck paying off a mountain of debt while my brother paraded around as the golden boy. I burst through the doors of Dr. Gabriel's suite. He was standing behind his heavy oak desk, holding a cream-colored folder. He looked at me, his face unreadable. "Sit down, Nathan," he said softly. I sank into the leather chair, gripping the armrests. "Tell me." Dr. Gabriel opened the folder. He didn't smile. He looked at me with a profound, heavy respect. "The board didn't just approve your application, Nathan. They were unanimous. Out of 3,000 applicants across the country, you are the sole recipient of the Clarence King Fellowship." The air left my lungs in a rush. "Full loan forgiveness," Dr. Gabriel continued, tapping the paper. "Effective immediately. A $500,000 research grant for your trauma study. And a guaranteed attending position at Johns Hopkins when your residency ends." I buried my face in my hands. The weight of $250,000 in debt, the weight of a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough, simply evaporated in the sterile air of that office. "I got it," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I actually got it." Dr. Gabriel walked around the desk and put a hand on my shoulder. "You earned it, Nathan. No one handed this to you. But there's something else." I looked up, wiping my eyes. "I received an invitation in the mail," Dr. Gabriel said, a wry, dangerous smile forming on his lips. "To a debt-free celebration for a Dr. Carter Harris at the Etoria Hotel tomorrow night. I assume this is your brother." I nodded slowly. "Yes, my parents paid off his loans. They're throwing a massive party to show him off to the medical board." Dr. Gabriel leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. "Well, I think it would be a terrible shame if the regional director of research, that's me, didn't attend such a prestigious event. And I think it would be even worse if I didn't make a formal announcement about the hospital's newest, most elite fellow." I looked at him, realizing exactly what he was offering. He wasn't just my mentor. He was handing me the sword to slay my own dragons. "They have no idea," I said, a slow, dark smile spreading across my face. "Then let's go educate them," Dr. Gabriel said. Before I left his office, Dr. Gabriel slid the official fellowship contract across the desk. It was printed on heavy, watermarked paper. I picked up a pen and signed my name on the dotted line, feeling the ink bind me to a future my parents could never touch, control, or claim credit for. "I suggest you don't mention a word of this until tomorrow night," Dr. Gabriel said, sliding the document into a secure envelope and handing it to me. "Let them build their stage. We will use it." I took the envelope, sliding it into the breast pocket of my jacket. Felt like I was carrying a loaded weapon. "Thank you, sir," I said. "Don't thank me, Nathan. Thank your own grit." I spent the next 24 hours in a state of hyperfocus. I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel stressed. I went to the dry cleaners and picked up my only decent suit, a navy blue two-piece I had bought off the rack 3 years ago. It wasn't bespoke Armani like the suits my father and Carter wore, but it didn't matter. Armor doesn't need to be expensive. It just needs to hold. As I stood in front of the mirror in my tiny bathroom, adjusting my tie, I thought about my mother's email. I thought about the white Porsche. I thought about Wyatt spying on me. For years, I had believed that if I just worked hard enough, they would eventually see my worth. I was wrong. Some people will never see your worth because your submission is the currency that buys their comfort. I checked my phone. It was time, which brings us back to where we started. The grand foyer of the Etoria Hotel. I walked onto the rooftop terrace. The sunset over Houston cast a golden, cinematic glow over the party. The catering staff wove through the crowd carrying trays of caviar and truffles. A massive banner hung behind the main stage, reading in bold, gold letters, "Congratulations, Dr. Carter Harris. A debt-free future." Not the Harris brothers. Just Carter. I hadn't been on the terrace for 2 minutes when my mother spotted me. She didn't walk over to hug me or offer me a drink. She marched straight up, her eyes scanning my off-the-rack suit with brief, masked distaste. "Nathan, you're late," she hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from a group of hospital administrators. "Listen to me, Cousin Wyatt is having an issue with the valet, and the catering staff forgot to label the gluten-free hors d'oeuvres. Go to the kitchen and sort it out before Dean Thomas tries one. He's strictly gluten-free." I looked down at her. Tonight, I was the sole recipient of the Clarence King Fellowship. I was the most valuable medical resident in the building, and she was treating me like the busboy. I didn't argue. I just gave her a slow, chilling smile. "Sure, Mom. I'll take care of it." I walked toward the catering tables, but I didn't check the labels. I stood near the edge of the terrace, overlooking the city skyline, feeling the envelope resting heavy against my chest. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message. From Carter. "I see you standing over there by the buffet. I know this whole thing is messed up. I didn't ask them to make it just about me. I couldn't say no to them. I'm sorry, man. I see you." I stared at the screen. Carter, the golden boy. For the first time in his life, the armor of his entitlement was cracking. He knew it was wrong. He knew he was standing on my back. But he was too much of a coward to stop it. I typed back a single sentence. "Keep your eyes open tonight, Carter." I slipped the phone back into my pocket. The jazz music faded out, and the screech of a microphone feedback echoed across the terrace. My father was standing at the podium, tapping his champagne glass with a silver spoon. The crowd fell silent, turning their attention to the stage. Dr. Gabriel stepped out from the crowd, catching my eye from across the room. He gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. The storm was about to break. The sharp, piercing ring of a silver spoon tapping firmly against a crystal champagne flute cut sharply through the low, elegant hum of the live jazz band. The lively chatter of the Houston elite immediately died down. My father stood tall and incredibly confident at the polished wooden podium set up at the far end of the sprawling rooftop terrace. He casually adjusted his custom silk tie and cleared his throat, projecting an air of absolute authority. The massive crowd of elite surgeons, hospital board members, and wealthy socialites turned their full attention toward the stage. Their faces were bathed in the warm, expensive golden light of the strung Edison bulbs overhead. I stood quietly near the glass edge of the terrace, my back to the glittering city skyline, watching the entire scene unfold like a poorly written play. My arms were crossed tightly over my cheap, off-the-rack navy suit. I could feel the thick, heavy envelope resting securely in my inside breast pocket. It was a shield, a weapon, and my permanent exit strategy all rolled into one single piece of paper. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and dear friends," my father began. His voice boomed effortlessly through the microphone system. He had the natural, rhythmic cadence of a man who was entirely used to people hanging onto his every single word. "Thank you all so much for joining us tonight at the Atoria. We are gathered here to celebrate a truly monumental, life-changing achievement." He paused, offering a warm, practiced smile to the crowd. Medical school is a brutal, unforgiving test of human endurance. It takes a massive toll on a young man. It demands sacrifice, sleepless nights, and absolute dedication. And tonight, my beautiful wife Eleanor and I are incredibly proud to stand before all of you and formally recognize our son, Dr. Carter Harris. A polite, enthusiastic round of applause rippled smoothly through the wealthy crowd. Carter was sitting at the VIP table located directly in front of the stage. He looked sick. His face was stark pale under the bright stage lights. He wasn't smiling his usual golden boy smile. He was staring blankly down at his pristine white linen dinner napkin, twisting the fabric nervously between his fingers. Carter has always been our shining star, my father continued, his chest puffing out with visible pride. He has the brilliance, the natural charm, and the sheer, unstoppable dedication to make a massive, lasting impact in the medical field. We know his future salary will reflect his incredible talents. But we also know that true brilliance needs a clear, unburdened runway to truly take off. My father looked over at my mother, who nodded encouragingly. That is exactly why Eleanor and I decided to dip heavily into our savings and the remaining family college fund to totally pay off Carter's medical school student loans. We wanted to give him a totally clean slate, a debt-free start to what we know will be a legendary, highly lucrative career in private practice. More loud applause erupted. A few of the older, established doctors in the crowd nodded in deep approval at my father's supposed grand generosity. My mother was standing right next to the podium, beaming radiantly, looking out at the crowd with a look of absolute, undeniable social triumph. She didn't even quickly glance in my direction. I was completely invisible to her. So, to Carter, my father said, raising his expensive crystal glass high into the air, the absolute best investment we ever made. The bright future of the Harris family. The crowd dutifully raised their glasses in unison. To Carter, they echoed warmly. My father stepped back slightly from the microphone, gesturing grandly with his free hand for Carter to come up to the podium and say a few words. The social expectation was crystal clear. Carter was supposed to walk up those 3 small steps, flash his $1 million, perfectly straight smile, thank our parents profusely for their generosity, and permanently cement his status as the undisputed golden boy of the Houston medical scene. Carter slowly pushed his heavy wooden chair back. The metal legs scraped harshly and loudly against the stone tiles of the terrace. He stood up, but he didn't immediately walk toward the stage. He stood completely frozen at his VIP table, his knuckles turning stark white as he gripped the edge of the thick linen tablecloth. He looked up at my father. Then he looked over at my mother. Finally, he turned his head slowly and looked directly through the sea of wealthy guests, his eyes searching until they locked firmly onto mine at the very back of the terrace. I didn't nod to encourage him. I didn't smile. I didn't offer him a lifeline. I just watched him, my face a mask of cold stone. I can't do this, Carter said. His voice was low, but in the quiet, expectant anticipation of the crowd, it carried clearly to the front rows. My father frowned deeply, instantly lowering his champagne glass. His perfect facade cracked for a fraction of a second. Carter? Come on up here, son. Everyone is waiting. No, Carter said, louder this time. His voice was visibly shaking, but there was a sudden, desperate, ragged edge to it. He reached forward abruptly and grabbed the microphone off the metal stand on the table in front of him. A sharp, loud squeal of audio feedback pierced the air, making several guests wince and cover their ears. This entire party is a lie, Carter announced, his voice echoing loudly and violently across the rooftop. The silence that immediately followed was absolute and terrifying. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that physically sucks the oxygen right out of your lungs. My mother's radiant, triumphant smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated panic. Carter, you've clearly had too much champagne, my father said quickly, stepping right to the edge of the stage, his tone carrying a very dark, dangerous warning. Put the microphone down right now and sit. I am entirely sober, Dad, Carter fired back, his grip on the microphone tightening so hard his forearm shook. He turned his body to face the crowd of elite doctors and administrators. My parents just told all of you that medical school is a brutal test of endurance. They are absolutely right. It is, but I didn't endure it. I was carried through it on a silver platter. He took a deep, ragged breath, his chest heaving visibly under his tailored suit. I had expensive private tutors paid for every time I failed a major exam. I had my luxury apartment rent paid in full every single month. And now, I have $250,000 in heavy debt magically wiped clean just for simply existing as their favorite son. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger straight toward the back of the dimly lit terrace. Toward me. My twin brother, Nathan, is standing right back there in the shadows, Carter said, his voice cracking violently with a raw mixture of deep shame and sudden, explosive defiance. The entire crowd physically turned their heads, suddenly noticing the solitary guy in the cheap, ill-fitting navy suit standing near the glass railing. He graduated on the exact same day as me, Carter continued, his voice rising in volume. He passed the exact same grueling medical boards, but he worked 80-hour weeks in the ER trauma center while I slept comfortably in my bed. He paid his own way through hell. He has the exact same massive debt I did, and my parents didn't give him a single solitary dime to help him. They didn't even have the decency to put his name on that massive banner hanging behind me. A collective, audible gasp rippled rapidly through the wealthy attendees. I saw Dean Thomas narrow his eyes sharply, looking intensely from Carter to my visibly sweating parents, and then directly to me. The polished, flawless veneer of the prestigious Harris family was aggressively cracking right in front of the most important, influential people in the entire city. I am not the best investment, Carter said, thick tears finally welling in his eyes and spilling over his cheeks. He looked right at my mother, who was staring back at him in utter paralyzed horror. I am just the one you liked more because I was easier to control. Nathan is the real doctor in this family. He survived you. I just surrendered to you. Carter aggressively slammed the heavy microphone down onto the VIP table. The loud, violent thud echoed like a gunshot in the quiet night air. He immediately turned around and walked briskly through the parted crowd, pushing past the stunned, motionless waiters, and disappeared quickly through the heavy glass doors into the hotel lobby. Total, chaotic silence gripped the terrace. My father stood frozen at the podium, his face completely drained of all color, his mouth opening and closing silently like a fish pulled out of water. My mother looked like she was genuinely going to faint, swaying slightly on her expensive heels. They had spent decades meticulously building this perfect, enviable public image, and their chosen golden child had just detonated a massive bomb right in the dead center of it. People finally started murmuring. The whispers quickly grew louder, filling the air with scandalous gossip. My father frantically tried to tap the main microphone again to desperately regain control, to spin the horrific narrative, to somehow play it off as a bad joke or a sudden mental breakdown induced by stress. But before he could utter a single word of damage control, a tall, highly commanding figure stepped out confidently from the front of the crowd and walked deliberately toward the center of the terrace. It was Dr. Gabriel. He didn't look angry. He didn't look shocked. He looked entirely, powerfully in his element. Dr. Gabriel didn't use a microphone. He absolutely didn't need one. He projected his deep voice with the natural, unquestionable authority of a man who ran the most prestigious medical research division in the entire state. If I may interject, Dr. Gabriel said, his voice ringing out clear, sharp, and incredibly steady. The frantic murmuring of the crowd stopped instantly. Everyone in that elite circle knew exactly who he was. Since we are ostensibly on the topic of celebrating truly extraordinary medical achievements tonight, I believe there is a highly urgent piece of news that this entire community needs to hear right now. My parents stared down at him from the stage, completely paralyzed with dread. They had absolutely no idea what was happening. They had lost total, terrifying control of the room. Dr. Gabriel turned his body slightly, directing the rapt attention of every single VIP on that terrace straight toward where I was standing. Dr. Carter Harris was entirely correct in his assessment, Dr. Gabriel announced clearly. Dr. Nathan Harris is an exceptionally brilliant physician, but he is far, far more than just a hard worker. I have the distinct honor of currently serving on the National Selection Committee for the Clarence King Fellowship. A low, collective murmur of absolute shock and deep awe swept rapidly through the crowd. Every single doctor, administrator, and board member in that room knew exactly what the King Fellowship was. It was the absolute holy grail of medical academia. It was the crown jewel. Out of over 3,000 of the brightest, most dedicated surgical and research residents in the United States, Dr. Gabriel continued, his voice rising powerfully, filling the cool night air. The National Board voted completely unanimously. The fellowship comes with a $500,000 independent research grant. It comes with a guaranteed, highly lucrative attending promotion at Johns Hopkins Hospital upon completion. And, most fittingly for the specific theme of tonight's lavish party, it comes with full, immediate federal forgiveness of all medical school student loans. Dr. Gabriel paused deliberately, letting the immense, crushing weight of his words settle fully over the stunned, silent crowd. He looked directly up at my father, who looked like he had just been struck hard by a physical blow. "I am incredibly proud and honored to officially announce tonight," Dr. Gabriel declared, pointing his hand firmly and directly at me, "that the sole national recipient of this year's Clarence King Fellowship is Dr. Nathan Harris." For a split second, the entire rooftop terrace was dead, pin-drop silent. And then the room completely exploded. It wasn't the polite, restrained golf clap applause my father had received earlier. It was a deafening roar. The chief of surgery started clapping violently, cheering loudly. Dean Thomas let out a loud, highly uncharacteristic cheer of pure excitement. The entire crowd of elite medical professionals physically turned toward me, their faces completely transformed from polite boredom and scandalous shock into absolute awe, deep respect, and eager admiration. I didn't move an inch. I didn't wave my hand. I didn't smile. I just stood perfectly still, letting the deafening, incredibly validating sound of their thunderous applause wash over my tired body. I looked directly at my mother. She was gripping the sharp edge of the wooden podium so hard her knuckles were stark white, her mouth hanging completely open in silent horror. The false narrative she had spent my entire life carefully writing and directing had just been violently burned to ash in a matter of seconds. I wasn't the silent, dumb workhorse anymore. I was the undisputed king of the room. The roaring applause slowly, gradually faded into a chaotic, highly energized buzz of excited professional networking. The social dynamic of the entire party shifted so violently and rapidly that it almost gave me whiplash. The massive, expensive banner celebrating Carter's debt-free future still hung proudly behind the stage, but it looked utterly ridiculous and pathetic now. It was nothing more than a gaudy monument to a massive lie that had just been publicly, ruthlessly dismantled. The crowd didn't return to their tables to eat their expensive dinners. They immediately swarmed me. Suddenly, the cheap, poorly tailored navy suit I was wearing didn't matter in the slightest. My scuffed, worn-out shoes didn't matter. I was instantly surrounded by the most powerful, wealthy people in the regional medical community, and they all desperately wanted a piece of my time and my attention. Dean Thomas, the powerful hospital administrator my mother, had been so incredibly desperate to impress with her gluten-free appetizers, aggressively pushed his way to the very front of the packed crowd. He eagerly extended a firm hand, a wide, highly genuine smile plastered across his face. "Nathan, my boy," Dean Thomas said, shaking my hand vigorously, pumping my arm up and down. "Absolute brilliant work. Just brilliant. We always knew you had a sharp, dedicated mind, but the King Fellowship? That is completely historic for our region. We need to schedule a formal sit-down in my private office first thing next week. The hospital board is going to want to deeply discuss retaining your incredible talents in this state before Hopkins steals you away from us completely." "Thank you very much, Dean Thomas," I said smoothly, feeling a strange, incredibly calm confidence settle deep into my bones. "I deeply appreciate the continued support." Right behind him was Dr. Adrian, the highly renowned and feared director of surgery from the Mayo Clinic, who was visiting the city as a special guest. She confidently handed me a sleek, thick, embossed business card. "Dr. Harris," Dr. Adrian said, her eyes locked onto mine with intense respect. "When your prestigious fellowship concludes, I strongly advise you to call this direct cell phone line. We have a massive, heavily funded trauma research wing opening up at our main campus, and I desperately need strong leaders who actually know how to grind in the trenches. I will definitely keep that in mind, Dr. Adrian. Thank you, I replied politely, smoothly tucking the expensive card into my pocket, right next to my life-changing fellowship envelope. For the next solid hour, I shook dozens of hands, intelligently discussed the finer, complex points of my trauma research proposal with department heads, and accepted business cards from highly influential people who absolutely wouldn't have given me the time of day just 2 hours ago. I was completely, totally in my element. I wasn't pretending to be someone I wasn't. I was just letting the undeniable, hard-earned results of my own grueling work speak for themselves. Through the constantly shifting crowd of admirers, I occasionally caught quick glimpses of my parents. They were entirely, utterly isolated. They looked incredibly small. They looked pathetic. For the very first time in my entire life, I looked at the two people who had cast a massive, dark shadow over my entire existence, and I realized with absolute clarity that they were completely powerless. All of their hoarded money and their country club connections couldn't buy this specific kind of respect. As the party finally began to awkwardly wind down and the remaining guests started trickling toward the glass elevators, I slowly walked over to one of the empty high-top tables near the glass railing to finish a cold glass of sparkling water. I was physically exhausted, but it was a deeply satisfying, victorious exhaustion. The intense adrenaline was finally leaving my system. I heard the slow, hesitant, distinct click of my mother's expensive heels on the stone tiles right behind me. Nathan. Her voice was incredibly small, shaky, and completely stripped of its usual commanding, arrogant edge. I turned around very slowly. Both of my parents were standing there, side by side. My father was awkwardly holding a shiny, dark mahogany box in his large hands. He looked incredibly uncomfortable, shifting his heavy weight nervously from foot to foot. They looked exactly like two lost strangers nervously asking for street directions. "Congratulations," my father said, his voice gruff, aggressively forcing the word out of his tight throat like it tasted like toxic ash. "The King Fellowship. That is quite an extraordinary achievement. We genuinely had absolutely no idea you were even applying for something of that magnitude." "I know you didn't," I said, my tone completely flat, cold, and unyielding, "because you never once asked me about my career." My mother stepped forward slightly, her eyes visibly red and puffy. I couldn't tell if it was from crying over Carter's massive public betrayal or from the sheer, crushing humiliation of the entire evening. "Nathan, please. We know things have been very difficult lately. We know you feel like we haven't been entirely fair with our resources. But we do love you. We just thought you were always so incredibly strong, so independent, that you simply didn't need us holding your hand every step of the way." "Don't," I said sharply, raising a single, firm hand to instantly stop her from speaking. "Do not stand here and try to desperately spin your blatant financial and emotional neglect into a fake compliment about my resilience. You didn't leave me alone because I was strong. You left me alone because pouring all of your vast resources into Carter was simply better for your own shallow social image. I read the highly confidential email you secretly sent to the residency board, Mom. The one where you maliciously tried to diagnose me with a fake mental health crisis just so Carter could easily steal the prime surgical spot. All the remaining color instantly, totally drained from her heavily made-up face. She took a physical step back, gasping softly in genuine horror. My father sharply turned his head, staring at her in absolute, complete shock. Clearly, she hadn't bothered to tell him about that particular piece of career-destroying sabotage. You saw that email?" she stammered weakly, her manicured hands trembling violently. "I saw absolutely everything," I said coldly, offering no comfort. I looked down at the dark mahogany box clutched in my father's sweaty hands. "What exactly is that?" My father looked down at the expensive box like he had completely forgotten he was even holding it. He quickly, nervously opened the polished lid. Inside, resting perfectly on a plush velvet cushion, was a massive, incredibly expensive solid gold Rolex watch. We bought this a few weeks ago." My father lied terribly, his voice reeking of pure desperation, We were always planning to give it to you tonight, in private after the party, to celebrate your medical graduation. As a small token of our immense pride. It was a pathetic, insulting bribe. A desperate, transparent, last-minute attempt to quickly latch onto my sudden, massive success and cheaply buy their way out of their immense guilt. They desperately wanted to hand me a shiny, expensive toy so I would magically forget 26 agonizing years of emotional starvation. I looked blankly at the gold watch. It was objectively beautiful, and it meant absolutely nothing to me. "Close the box, Dad," I said quietly, my voice devoid of any anger. "Nathan, please just take it." My mother pleaded desperately, actually reaching out to physically touch my arm. I took a quick step back, completely avoiding her touch as if she were diseased. "Let us do this one small thing for you. Let us start over." "Love is not a gold watch," I said, looking her dead in her terrified eyes. "Love is presence. Love is defending your child when it's hard, not throwing them completely under the bus to conveniently clear a path for the other one. Love is paying attention to your child before there is a massive audience watching." I calmly buttoned my cheap navy suit jacket. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad. I just felt completely, wonderfully, permanently detached. "Keep the watch," I said, firmly turning my back on them both. "Give it to Cousin Wyatt. I'm absolutely sure he'll appreciate the generous payment for constantly spying on me for you. And while you're at it, you can keep your inheritance, too. I don't want a single dime of it." I didn't wait even a second to see their horrified reactions. I walked confidently across the terrace, stepped into the waiting glass elevator, and firmly pressed the glowing button for the lobby. The heavy doors slid shut, permanently cutting off the pathetic view of my parents standing completely alone in the tragic ruins of their perfect night. I walked out the front doors into the cool, refreshing Houston night air, flagged down a cheap yellow cab, and went back to my apartment to finally pack my bags. 3 short weeks later, the intense, suffocating, oppressive heat of Texas was finally, permanently behind me. The crisp, incredibly cool autumn air of Cambridge, Massachusetts, was a deeply welcome, refreshing shock to my system. I stood comfortably in the middle of my brand new, highly spacious, light-filled apartment, surrounded completely by a massive fortress of brown cardboard moving boxes. The prestigious King Fellowship didn't just give me an elite title and academic prestige. It gave me the absolute, undeniable financial freedom to actually breathe for the first time in my adult life. My new attending salary at the hospital was incredibly substantial, and without the crushing, suffocating weight of a $250,000 federal loan hanging over my tired head, I felt like I was literally floating on air. I was carefully taping up a heavy box of old, worn medical journals when a firm, steady knock echoed loudly on my front door. I opened it. Carter was standing quietly in the hallway. He was wearing a simple, faded gray hoodie and a pair of worn jeans. He looked physically tired, but the arrogant, polished, highly manufactured sheen he used to wear like heavy armor was entirely gone. "Hey!" he said quietly, nervously stuffing his hands deep into his hoodie pockets. "I know I really should have called first, but I had a long layover at Logan Airport on my way to a minor medical conference, and I really wanted to see you." I stepped aside slowly, opening the wooden door wider. "Come in." He walked cautiously into the apartment, looking around appreciatively at the tall stacks of books and the beautiful, sweeping view of the historic city out the large bay window. He let out a long, heavy breath. "This is a really nice place, Nathan," he said softly. "It's quiet," I replied simply, casually leaning against the granite kitchen counter. We stood in absolute silence for a long moment. It wasn't the incredibly tense, aggressively competitive silence that had defined our entire childhood. It was a heavy, deeply evaluating, honest silence between 2 grown men who were finally seeing each other clearly, without any parental filters, for the very first time. "I completely left the private clinic," Carter said suddenly, staring intensely out the window at the bustling street below. "Dad's wealthy country club friends ran the whole operation. I couldn't stand being inside that building anymore. Every single time I looked at a patient, I felt like an absolute fraud. I'm taking a massive step back. I'm going to work at a severely underfunded community health center on the east side of Houston for a while. I need to actually learn how to be a real doctor without a massive financial safety net catching me every time I stumble. I nodded slowly, genuinely impressed. It was easily the hardest, smartest, most mature decision he had ever made in his entire life. That's a really good move, Carter. It will make you better. He turned to look directly at me, his eyes incredibly earnest and filled with deep regret. I am so incredibly sorry, Nathan, for absolutely all of it. I knew they were emotionally and financially starving you out, and I just kept eagerly eating the massive feasts they put on my plate. I was completely terrified that if I didn't play the role of the perfect, flawless golden boy, they would drop me just as fast as they dropped you. I was a massive coward. You were, I agreed plainly, offering absolutely no fake reassurance. There was 0 point in sugarcoating the past now. But you stood up at the Atoria Hotel, in front of everyone who mattered to them. That took serious guts. You burned their whole fake stage to the ground. Carter offered a weak, highly self-deprecating smile. Yeah, well, it was about damn time one of us finally told the ugly truth out loud. He walked over slowly and extended his right hand. I absolutely do not expect you to magically forgive me overnight, but I really want to slowly earn my brother back. If you'll let me try. I looked down at his outstretched hand. We had shared a womb. We had shared a last name. We had shared a face. But this was the very first time in 26 years we were actually sharing mutual, hard-earned respect. I reached out and shook his hand firmly. One step at a time, I said. He left an hour later to catch his flight, and for the absolute first time in my entire life, I watched my twin brother walk away without feeling a single toxic ounce of deep-seated resentment. 6 incredibly fast months flew by in an absolute wonderful blur of intense clinical research, groundbreaking trauma surgeries, and incredibly long, deeply fulfilling days working at Johns Hopkins. Working directly under Dr. Gabriel's mentorship was highly demanding, but I completely thrived in the intense pressure. The hospital administration had already pulled me into several high-level meetings to seriously discuss a fast-track promotion to a senior department head position once my fellowship officially concluded next year. For the very first time in my life, my massive salary and my highly prestigious title weren't weapons I needed to use to desperately prove my worth to my family. They were simply the natural, rewarding byproducts of my absolute, unwavering dedication to the field of medicine. I was genuinely happy. I was completely, utterly removed from the toxic, manipulative drama of my parents in Houston. Until a rainy Tuesday morning in late October. I was sitting comfortably in my private office, sipping a hot cup of coffee, when an urgent email suddenly popped into my personal inbox. It was from Luke, my old, loyal buddy from the ER back in Texas. The subject line was just a single, wide-eyed shocked emoji. Attached to the email was a high-resolution scanned PDF of a full page from the Houston Chronicle, the city's premier, highly read society and business newspaper. I quickly clicked on the image, zooming in tightly on the brightly highlighted article. My blood instantly, violently boiled. The bold headline read, "Local philanthropists Robert and Eleanor Harris proudly sponsor son's historic National Medical Fellowship." Right beneath the sickening headline was a large, professionally shot, highly staged photograph of my parents. They were smiling benevolently, looking like absolute saints, sitting comfortably in their pristine, expensive living room. The lengthy article detailed my incredible achievement of winning the Clarence King Fellowship, accurately calling it a monumental victory for the entire Houston medical community. But the narrative they had aggressively fed the journalist was completely, disgustingly twisted into a horrific lie. The journalist wrote, through the unwavering, incredibly generous financial and emotional support of his loving parents, Dr. Nathan Harris was able to focus entirely on his groundbreaking medical research. We always pushed Nathan to passionately pursue the absolute highest tiers of academia, Eleanor Harris noted in an exclusive, tearful interview. We gladly funded his early research endeavors, and supported him financially to ensure he had the solid foundation necessary to win this prestigious fellowship. They were stealing it. They couldn't ignore my massive success anymore, so they had made the calculated decision to violently, publicly hijack it. They were actively using their immense wealth and deep social connections to completely rewrite family history, desperately painting themselves as the generous, deeply loving benefactors who had carefully paved the golden road to my fellowship. They were literally using my name and my hard work to cheaply buy back the social prestige and respect they had instantly lost when Carter walked out of that party. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my coffee mug against the wall. The cold, highly precise, surgical detachment I had felt at the Etoria Hotel immediately returned, but it was sharper, colder, and infinitely more dangerous than ever before. I calmly picked up my office desk phone and dialed a specific, private number I had saved strictly for emergencies. It was the direct, unlisted line to Mr. Sterling, a high-powered, absolutely ruthless corporate lawyer in Boston who specifically handled highly sensitive legal affairs for top-tier medical staff. "Mr. Sterling," I said the second he answered the phone. "This is Dr. Nathan Harris. I need to formally retain your aggressive legal services immediately. I want a highly restrictive cease and desist drafted and heavily expedited to Texas by the end of the business day." "Of course, Dr. Harris," the lawyer replied smoothly, his tone strictly business. "Who exactly is the target of this action?" "Robert and Eleanor Harris," I stated, my voice like absolute ice. "My parents." Within exactly 48 hours, a massive, legally devastating, incredibly thick packet of documents was delivered via specialized certified courier directly to my parents' sprawling suburban mansion. The cease and desist document was absolutely airtight. It explicitly, legally forbade them from ever using my name, my likeness, my specific medical title, or any mention whatsoever of my fellowship in any public, private, or press capacity ever again. It threatened immediate, financially ruinous litigation for severe defamation, public fraud, and false representation if they ever even attempted to publicly claim financial credit for my grueling work again. But I absolutely didn't stop there. I needed to cut the cancer out completely. I had Mr. Sterling carefully draft a second, highly specific, ironclad legal document and prominently include it at the very front of the legal packet. It was a formal, legally binding, totally irrevocable waiver of inheritance. I legally signed away any and all future rights to their vast estate, their remaining college funds, their stock portfolios, their offshore bank accounts, and their numerous properties. Cutting them off felt exactly like attending a quiet funeral for a family that had never actually existed in the first place, completely severing ties like a messy, bitter divorce where absolutely no one fights for custody of the ugly truth. I drafted a short, brutally honest, single-page letter to accompany the heavy legal threats, and I made absolutely sure it was the very first thing they read when they broke the seal on the envelope. The letter read, "You spent 26 long years obsessively hoarding your wealth, maliciously using it to control, manipulate, and intentionally divide your own children. You emotionally and financially starved me out, desperately hoping I would eventually break and beg for a tiny seat at your table. I am writing this legal notice to formally inform you that your money has absolutely no power over me anymore. I do not want your dirty inheritance. I do not want your fake, socially manufactured public support. I have bought my own permanent freedom with my own blood and sweat. Do not ever contact me again, or my lawyer will see you in court. Dr. Nathan Harris." I never received a single reply from them. They never published another fake article about me in the paper. The heavy, suffocating, toxic chain that had bound me to their manipulative empire for my entire life was finally, completely, and permanently shattered. I am telling you this intensely personal story today, sitting calmly in my own private office, wearing my own hard-earned white coat, not to bitterly complain about my difficult past. I am telling you this because I know exactly how many of you are sitting in the dark right now, feeling completely invisible, wondering why you simply aren't enough for the very people who are supposed to love and protect you unconditionally. If you are the forgotten child in your family, the silent workhorse, the one who is constantly unfairly told to be strong, just so others can comfortably neglect you, I desperately need you to hear this loud and clear. Their tragic inability to see your immense worth does not decrease your true value for a single second. You absolutely do not need to be the chosen golden child to win at life. You do not need their toxic validation, their controlling money, or their hollow, fake applause. Let them build their fragile castles out of glass and inflated ego. You just keep putting your head down. You keep grinding in the silence. You keep building your own massive foundation out of solid rock. Because I promise you, one day the storm is going to come. And when the fragile glass shatters and their carefully crafted illusions fall completely apart, you are going to be the only one left standing strong. You will walk confidently into a room where everyone fully expected you to sit quietly in the back, and you will completely command the entire space. You will become your own hero, your own savior. And trust me, the view from the top of the mountain is incredibly beautiful when you climb it yourself. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. I know it was a long, heavy journey, but I hope this resonated with you in some meaningful way. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, fighting for your worth in a place where it was constantly ignored? If you made it all the way to the end of this video, you are part of a very special group. I want you to go down to the comments right now and type the letter W. W stands for winner. That is our secret code. It is a sign to let me know that you are part of the 1% club, the resilient, amazing people who watch this entire journey and truly understand what it takes to fight back and win against all odds. Please don't forget to hit that like button and follow the channel so we can keep sharing these powerful journeys together. Stay strong, keep fighting for yourself, and I will see you in the next story.